Before we begin, welcome back to House of Cleopatra. If stories of ancient power, forbidden love, and royal destiny move your heart, subscribe now. A new legend rises here every week, and today, we enter the most dangerous love story in human history. The story begins not with a meeting, but with a heartbreak. After Julius Caesar's assassination, Cleopatra returned to Egypt carrying not victory, but survival. Rome no longer saw her as an ally. They saw her as a threat, an Eastern queen who had dared to stand beside the greatest man in their republic. With Caesar gone, Cleopatra was alone once more, holding her infant son, Caesarion, who had suddenly become both her greatest treasure and her greatest danger. Rome whispered that the boy was a rival to their future. The political knives were sharpening. Cleopatra knew she needed protection not just for Egypt, but for Caesarion's life. Meanwhile, far away in Rome, another giant was rising, Mark Antony. If Caesar was intellect and strategy, Antony was fire and force. He was Rome's greatest general, beloved by soldiers, feared by enemies, and notorious for living larger than life. Where Caesar was composed, Antony was explosive. Where Caesar was diplomatic, Antony was unpredictable. And where Caesar sought in empires, Antony sought in passions. He was a man who could win wars but could lose himself in desire. And fate knew exactly whom to place in his path. Their first meeting did not happen in the palace. It happened on the river in Tarsus, in a moment that would become one of the most iconic entrances in ancient history. Antony demanded Cleopatra come to him to answer accusations from Rome. But Cleopatra did not walk into his city like a prisoner. She arrived like a goddess descending from mist. Her golden barge sailed down the river at sunset. Its sails dyed purple, the color of kings. Silver oars dipped into the water in perfect rhythm. Perfume drifted across the waves. Musicians played softly. Attendants dressed as nymphs and cupids stood beside her. And Cleopatra, cloaked in gold, appeared not as a queen fleeing danger, but as Aphrodite reborn. When Antony saw her, he did not see politics. He saw destiny. In that single moment, they recognized each other, two rulers with wounds, ambitions, and fire burning inside them. And when Cleopatra stepped onto the shore and locked eyes with Antony, there was no hesitation, no subtle calculation, just a silent recognition between two souls who understood that life had brought them to each other at the exact moment they needed it. Their nights in Tarsus were a mix of laughter, arguments, feasts, and whispered secrets. Cleopatra saw in Antony something Caesar never had, a man who loved life wildly, who could be both fierce and tender, who understood her longing not just to rule, but to be seen. Antony, for the first time, found someone who did not fear him, flatter him, or stand below him. Cleopatra stood beside him with the confidence of a queen, the intellect of a diplomat, and the emotional fire that matched his own. But this was no fairy tale romance. Behind the wine, the dancing, and the stolen kisses in candlelit chambers, there was danger. Rome was watching. Every whisper, every rumor, every gesture between them became a weapon used by their enemies. Politicians, especially Octavian, Caesar's cold and calculating air, feared that together, Antony and Cleopatra could form a power too great to control. And so the propaganda began. Rome didn't say Antony loves Cleopatra. Rome said, "The queen has bewitched him." They said he had abandoned Roman virtue. They said he had become a slave to an Eastern temptress. They did not attack his strategy. They attacked Cleopatra's womanhood. Despite it all, Antony returned to Egypt with her. And in Alexandria, their love story grew into something larger than life. They built a world of their own: lavish festivals, intellectual salons, military councils by day, and laughter-filled nights by torchlight. Cleopatra bore him twins. They dreamed of uniting their kingdoms. They believed they could reshape the East and stand against Rome as equals. They imagined a new empire carried by both their names. But love, when it grows too large, casts a shadow, and in that shadow, enemies move silently. Octavian launched a psychological war. He spread stories of Antony giving Roman lands to Cleopatra, of abandoning Rome for Egypt, of kneeling before her throne. Some were true, many were lies. But lies, in politics, are weapons sharper than swords. Antony and Cleopatra did not lose their empire on the battlefield first. They lost it in the hearts of Romans, who began to fear a world ruled by a queen. As the war rose, Cleopatra stood beside Antony not as a lover but as a commander. At Actium, their combined fleets faced Octavian, but betrayal struck from within. Roman generals defected, supplies failed, and Antony, torn between strategy and protecting Cleopatra, made the choice that sealed their fate. When her ship retreated under enemy pressure, Antony followed not out of fear, but out of love stronger than reason. Historians mocked him for it. But in truth, he was a man who chose a woman he loved over the empire he could no longer trust. After the defeat, the world around them collapsed piece by piece. Antony's soldiers deserted. Allies surrendered. Octavian marched toward Alexandria with the cold patience of a man who knew his victory was already written. And Antony, once one of the most feared generals in the world, stood in a palace filled with memories but devoid of hope. When Antony heard the false rumor that Cleopatra had died spread intentionally to break him, something inside him shattered. Unable to imagine a life without her, he chose his final act. He fell upon his own sword, but death did not come quickly. Dying, bleeding, and gasping for breath, Antony begged to be taken to Cleopatra. And in one of the most tragic scenes in ancient history, he was lifted into her hidden chamber. As she held him, their blood mixing with tears, Antony whispered his final words: "Do not mourn. Live, and choose a noble death." When he died in her arms, something in Cleopatra died as well. Cleopatra knew exactly what awaited her if she surrendered. Octavian did not want her alive. He wanted her humiliated, paraded through Rome as a chained trophy. And Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, the woman who conquered both Caesar and Antony not through seduction, but intelligence and fire, would never allow her legacy to be turned into a circus. So Cleopatra made her final decision. She arranged a quiet room in her mausoleum. She dressed in her royal gold. She held the memories of the two men she had loved, one who taught her strategy, and one who taught her how deeply a heart could burn. The method of her death remains debated: an asp, a poison needle, a hidden toxin. But what matters is this: Cleopatra chose her ending. In a world ruled by men who feared her power, she claimed the only thing no one could steal: her dignity. When Octavian entered her chamber, he found not a captive queen, but a sovereign who decided her own fate. And with her death came the end of Egypt's royal bloodline. Her son, Caesarion, was executed. Her children with Antony were spared but taken to Rome. The Ptolemaic dynasty, the line of pharaohs that ruled for centuries, ended with a single heartbeat in the Golden Chamber. But Cleopatra's story did not end in that room. It lived on in Rome, in poetry, in legends, and in every history book written since. She became the symbol of a love too powerful for empires, a queen too brilliant for her enemies, and a woman too unforgettable for time to erase. And that is the tragedy and beauty of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Their love did not survive, but it outlived everyone who tried to destroy it. Here, in House of Cleopatra, their story will never be forgotten. If this tale moved your heart, subscribe now. Next week, another legend rises.